over the last few weeks. It's intensified, especially in the last few days. I keep hearing people say that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, as Seventh-day Adventists, we shouldn't be focusing on social justice. Instead, we should be focusing on proclaiming the gospel. We need to be focusing on evangelism. Let the government worry about those social issues and let us worry about the spiritual issues. But can you actually separate the two? Can we actually preach the gospel if we're not taking care of the people that we're preaching to? And I thought that this channel was about parenting. Is this even a parenting issue? Like, why does social justice matter to parents? In this video, we are going to talk about those very things. We're going to talk about what the church should be doing if we're following Jesus Christ. We're going to be talking about what parents should be doing if we want to raise disciples of Jesus Christ. And we're going to talk about how we can do better. So let's get started. I think if we're going to really hit this head on, we first got to talk about parents. Why does this matter to parents? Why does social justice even matter? Well, let's think for a moment. If we want to raise children who not only believe the gospel, but see how it's played out into our lives and the lives of those around us, if we want to actually make this a concrete, real thing instead of just a hypothetical belief system, how does it play out? How does it actually sound to those who are hurting and suffering when we say that what they're hurting and suffering about doesn't matter? How does it feel when we talk about the fact that, yeah, we understand that that's your plight, but we're going to rely on the government to fix that? It's not something that the church cares about. We're sending the clear message that somehow the gospel is less applicable to them because of the color of their skin, because of their socioeconomic standing, because of their country of origin. Somehow, because of those factors outside of their control, the gospel's less for them. I'm not okay with that message. And I would imagine that you're not either. So, what does it look like for us parents to raise children who actually follow Jesus, actually engage with the question, who is my neighbor? One of the biggest arguments used to convey this idea that we as Christians, as pastors, as parents, shouldn't be engaged in social issues is the fact that Jesus seemingly never got engaged. I mean, Rome was terrible. The things they did to people was atrocious. The cross itself was a gruesome way to murder people. And yet, Jesus doesn't seem to speak out to that. In fact, when people try to draw him into that conversation, Jesus sidesteps it. So, what does it look like for us to be followers of Jesus? Did Jesus care about social justice? When you read through the Gospels, it's clear Jesus cared about social justice. Although Jesus didn't fight Rome, he does make a clear stand for those who are suffering. Jesus stood with women when there was the woman being stoned for adultery, and Jesus steps in to the firing squad for the woman. Jesus stands with Samaritans, as he met the Samaritan woman by the well, the woman who even her own community had rejected her. Jesus lets her know the gospel is for her. Jesus stands with Samaritans again as he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, harshly criticizing the way that the Jewish leaders treated those who are suffering, and instead lifts up the persecuted. Jesus stood with Gentiles as he walks all the way with his disciples to the region of Tyre and Sidon to connect with a woman who is suffering. Jesus stands with tax collectors and sinners as over and over again he gets condemned for eating in their homes, inviting himself into the home of the chief tax collector Zacchaeus to make it clear the gospel was meant for them. Jesus stood with those who were sick and those who were suffering. I think of the story of blind Bartimaeus as Jesus is walking out of the city of Jericho. People are saying, Bartimaeus, be quiet. As Bartimaeus is calling out louder and louder, and finally Jesus stops and says, bring him to me. Jesus makes time for the least of these over and over and over again. Jesus stands with children as the disciples are saying, no, stay back. Jesus has more important things to do. And Jesus says, what in the world? There's nothing more important than children. So you can't tell me, if you've read the Gospels, you can't tell me that Jesus didn't stand for social issues. He is making social reform over and over again. When there are those being oppressed, he stands with the oppressed, not with the oppressors. Although Jesus didn't fight Rome, it might just be because he spent all of his time and energy fighting his own people in the way they were mistreating people. Jesus didn't rely on the government to fix all of the social issues. Instead, he stepped right into the thick of these social issues that were plaguing the people of his day, and he stood with the oppressed. In fact, if you want to get real for a moment, the way Jesus dealt with social issues, instead of talking about the way other people were treating the Jews, he talked about the way the Jews were treating other people. This is a harsh criticism for white America. We should be leading the charge on this. We should be, as pastors, as Christians, as disciples of Jesus, as Seventh-day Adventists, we should be on the forefront. We need to be the ones leading the charge, saying, this is not okay to treat other people this way. That's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. That's what it means to follow him. We need to be criticizing how our people are treating others. Should we be involved in social justice? Of course. Separating social justice from the gospel, it neuters the gospel. When you separate social justice and actually caring about people, it makes the gospel meaningless, because the gospel is all about a God who cared so much about his people that he left his throne in heaven to come, to dwell with them, to suffer with them, to live with them. Philippians chapter 2 says that he lowered himself below humanity to lift humanity up. This is what we as followers of Jesus are called to do. This is what we have been tasked with. So don't tell me that this isn't part of evangelism. Don't tell me that this isn't part of sharing the gospel, because it is. Taking care of the least of these is at the heart of the gospel. Matthew chapter 25, as Jesus is talking and differentiating between those who are his true disciples and those who are not. It boils down to how we treat those who are suffering. What are we as a church doing to those in need? What are we doing for those who are without? As parents, we want to raise children who find their value in Jesus Christ. We want to raise children who see their value not based on their looks or their skin color, not based on their education, not based on their ability to play sports. We want their value to be based on Jesus Christ, on what happened there at the cross, because that value doesn't come and go as our grades change. That value doesn't come and go as we age. That value doesn't come and go as the government changes policies. That value is eternal. And so, as parents, we want to raise children who find their value in the cross. But we cannot do that if we don't also raise children who find other people's value in the cross. So, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of skin color, regardless of nationality, regardless of religious beliefs, Jesus died for you. Jesus loved you so much. He saw value in you, and he wanted you to be his child. He wanted you to be a part of his family. This is what we want to raise our children to believe. How can we do that? How can we do that if somehow, by our actions, they see us as treating someone else as less than? How can we show them the love Jesus has for them if we're not passing that love on to those around us? So I challenge you. I challenge you as Christian parents, let us take a stand. Let us not be silent. Let us not wait for the government to fix these spiritual problems. But let us, and I'm speaking primarily right now to the white parents out there. Let us raise children who grow up seeing themselves as children of God and seeing everyone around them as children of God. And let this reshape the way we as a church move forward.